Imagine working years for a company, closing the biggest deal of your career, expecting a $450,000 bonus, only to watch the CEO hand it to his spoiled son like pocket change. I stayed quiet. I didn't argue. But when I slid one document across his desk, his empire began to crumble. This isn't just a story about greed, it's about how one signature can turn betrayal into revenge. I had been with Stratford Dynamics, a mid-sized logistics tech company in Dallas, for nearly a decade. My name is Ethan Ross, Senior Project Director. 10 years of late nights, endless flights, and billion-dollar client wins had earned me one thing I actually believed in: respect. Or so I thought. Last year, I closed the biggest deal in the company's history. A $120 million partnership with a federal supply chain contractor. Everyone knew the stakes. If it failed, Stratford Dynamics would fold. If it succeeded, we'd leap into the top tier of U.S. logistics firms. It succeeded. Spectacularly. The board congratulated me. My team celebrated. And the CFO told me, off record, that my performance bonus, $450,000, was already approved. After years of grinding, that money meant more than a payday. It was a down payment on my first home, a chance to finally get out of a cramped apartment and give my wife the life I'd promised. But when the quarterly review came, the air in the boardroom was different. The CEO, Richard Kane, sat at the head of the table with his usual smug smile. Beside him sat his son, Tyler Kane, a 30-year-old executive whose greatest achievements were crashing Ferraris and showing up late to meetings. Richard shuffled some papers, cleared his throat, and delivered the blow with a casual cruelty I'll never forget. Due to restructuring, he said smoothly, we've reassigned discretionary bonuses this quarter. Ethan, your numbers are excellent, of course, but the board has decided to allocate your $450,000 package elsewhere. I blinked. Elsewhere? He smiled, patting his son on the back. Tyler has stepped into a leadership role this year. We feel rewarding him ensures continuity of the company's vision. The room spun. Tyler grinned like a child unwrapping a toy. My bonus, months of blood and sweat, was gone, gifted to a nepotistic failure. I wanted to shout, flip the table, call out the theft for what it was. But I didn't. I nodded, forced a tight smile, and said, understood. Richard leaned back, satisfied, as if I'd rolled over. The meeting continued. Everyone avoided my eyes. But inside, I wasn't broken. I was planning. That night, I pulled out a folder I had been keeping for months. A document I had quietly built, piece by piece, as I noticed the company's questionable practices. Falsified expense reports, inflated valuations, tax optimizations that skirted legality. Richard thought no one was paying attention. But I was. And when I slid that document across his desk, he'd finally understand the cost of betrayal. After the board meeting, I walked out of Stratford's glass tower into the blistering Dallas heat. My body was calm, but my mind burned with a rage I couldn't show. To everyone passing on the sidewalk, I looked like any other corporate executive leaving work. Inside, though, I was planning revenge. My wife, Emily, was waiting at home. She had prepared a simple dinner, pasta with garlic bread, and set the table like it was a small celebration. She didn't know yet. I hadn't told her about the bonus officially coming, but she guessed. She always did. Did it come through? She asked, her eyes shining. The words lodged in my throat. I forced a smile, but it cracked. Finally, I told her the truth. Richard gave it to Tyler. Her fork clattered onto the plate. He what? He stole it. Called it reallocation. Tyler got it. Emily's face turned red, her voice trembling. That's theft, Ethan. You worked for that money. We planned our future around it. I nodded. I know. But I didn't fight it. Her eyes widened. Why not? Because shouting in that boardroom would have made me look desperate. Weak. But if I stay quiet, I can move in the shadows. She studied me carefully, then slowly nodded. Emily had always been my anchor. She didn't like revenge, but she trusted my instincts. Just be careful, she whispered. That night, I sat in my study, pulling out the thick folder I'd been compiling. I wasn't exaggerating when I said Richard had skeletons. Years of expense reports, consulting fees to shell companies, payments funneled through subsidiaries. It was corporate fraud, plain and simple. I had evidence. But evidence means nothing if it isn't placed in the right hands. The next morning, I returned to the office. Tyler strutted around like he'd just won a championship. He slapped backs, bragged about a personal reward from his father, and loudly ordered new furniture for his office. My coworkers rolled their eyes, but no one dared challenge him. When he passed me in the hallway, he smirked. "Tough break, Ross. Maybe next time." I didn't respond. I just smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides a storm. Later that afternoon, I met with Lydia Bennett, the company's HR director. She was sharp, meticulous, and one of the few people I trusted. I closed the office door behind us and set the folder on her desk. "What's this?" she asked. "Proof," I said. "Richard's been cooking the books for years. Tyler's the least of our problems." Her eyes widened as she skimmed the documents. "Ethan, this could sink the company." I nodded. "Or save it from him. But I can't go to the board directly. Richard controls them." Lydia leaned back, considering. "The SEC would eat this alive. But you'd go down with it too. Whistleblowers rarely walk away clean." I looked her dead in the eye. "I don't care about clean. I care about justice." She closed the folder carefully, locking it in her desk. "You're playing a dangerous game, Ethan." I smiled grimly. "So is Richard." That night, lying beside Emily, I whispered, "It's starting." She squeezed my hand. "Then finish it." Tyler Kane wasn't just incompetent. He was reckless. Within weeks of receiving his bonus, he became a liability even Richard couldn't ignore. First, he leased a new Maserati under the company's expense account. Then he chartered a private jet for a weekend trip to Miami, billing it as a strategic leadership summit. Pictures of him partying on yachts leaked to social media. At Monday's executive meeting, Richard brushed it off with a chuckle. "Boys will be boys," he said, ignoring the tension in the room. But behind the polite smiles, directors exchanged nervous glances. Tyler wasn't just wasting money. He was embarrassing the company. I watched silently, making mental notes. Tyler was digging his own grave, and I didn't need to lift a finger. All I had to do was time the strike. One afternoon, while Tyler was in his office bragging loudly on the phone, I slipped into the archives room. Years of financial reports, contracts, and digital backups sat waiting. I copied files discreetly, adding them to my growing arsenal. That evening, I sent an anonymous email from a burner account to the SEC. "You may want to look into Stratford Dynamics Q4 expense reporting. Specifically, CEO Richard Kane and Executive Tyler Kane. Start with travel and consulting fees." Attached were select documents, just enough to spark suspicion. Days later, the whispers began. Inspectors visiting the building. Audits announced. Richard looked increasingly tense, his easy confidence cracking at the edges. But Tyler? He was oblivious. One Friday, he waltzed into the break room, flashing his Rolex, and bragged to a group of analysts. "Dad says when he retires, I'll take over. CEO by 35, baby." One of the analysts glanced at me nervously, but I kept my face blank. Inside though, I laughed. Tyler was boasting about a throne that was already collapsing. The following Monday, Lydia pulled me into her office. "The SEC contacted me," she whispered. "They're digging deep. Richard suspects a leak." "Does he know it's me?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not yet. But he's paranoid. Watch your back." That night, Emily noticed me staring out the window, lost in thought. "Do you ever worry this will backfire?" she asked softly. "Every day," I admitted. But when Richard stole my bonus, he didn't just steal money. He stole respect. And I won't let that stand. By spring, Stratford Dynamics was under investigation. Auditors combed through records, asking uncomfortable questions. Richard tried to keep a brave face, but his temper was short, and board members whispered in hallways. At one meeting, an auditor asked about unusually high consulting fees to a shell company in Nevada. Richard stammered through an explanation, sweating. Tyler, clueless as ever, interrupted with a laugh. "That's just one of Dad's side hustles." The auditor raised an eyebrow. Richard nearly choked. Behind closed doors, Richard unleashed his fury on Tyler. I overheard the shouting match from the hallway. "Do you want to destroy this company?" Richard roared. Tyler shouted back. "You said I'd inherit it. Stop treating me like a child." The rift between father and son widened. And I kept collecting evidence. One evening, I invited Lydia and another trusted ally, Marcus, head of compliance, to my apartment. We spread the documents across my dining table. Falsified invoices, fraudulent tax filings, unreported offshore accounts. "This isn't just misconduct," Marcus said grimly. "This is criminal." Lydia looked at me. "If we hand this to the SEC, Stratford collapses. Thousands lose jobs. Are you ready for that?" I hesitated. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about responsibility. But then I thought of Emily, of the stolen bonus, of Richard's smug smile as he handed my future to his spoiled son. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." We drafted a packet. Comprehensive, undeniable. I didn't put my name on it. I didn't need to. Truth speaks for itself. The next morning, I walked into Richard's office. He was hunched over his desk, eyes bloodshot, barking into the phone. I set a plain envelope on his desk. "What's this?" he snapped. I smiled faintly. "Read it." Inside was a single-page summary of the evidence, stripped of identifiers but damning enough to shake him. His face drained of color as he skimmed. "You!" he hissed. "You did this." I didn't answer. I just held his gaze, then turned and walked out. The quiet was more powerful than shouting. The storm broke faster than I expected. Within a week, the SEC raided Stratford's offices, seizing computers and boxes of documents. Employees whispered in hallways, terrified. Board members scheduled emergency meetings. Reporters camped outside the building. Richard tried to project authority, giving a press statement about routine reviews. But everyone knew the truth. His empire was crumbling. Tyler panicked. He stormed into my office one afternoon, slamming the door behind him. "Did you do this?" he hissed. I leaned back, calm. "Do what?" He paced like a caged animal. "The investigation. The leaks. Dad thinks it's someone inside." I shrugged. "Then maybe he should look in the mirror." His face turned crimson. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing without this company. When Dad goes down, you'll go down too." I smiled thinly. "We'll see." The next day, Richard summoned me to his office. His voice was venom. "I know it's you, Ross. You think you can take me down? You don't understand how deep my influence runs." I said nothing, sliding a single sheet across his desk, an official notice from the SEC, demanding a sworn deposition. His hands shook as he read it. For the first time, Richard Kane looked afraid. Word spread quickly. Investors pulled out. Stock plummeted. Tyler's smugness evaporated as his credit cards were frozen. His Maserati repossessed. The same employees who once feared him now smirked behind his back. At home, Emily squeezed my hand. "It's happening," she whispered. But victory wasn't sweet yet. Because Richard was cornered, and cornered men are dangerous. The war wasn't over. It was only beginning. The day Stratford Dynamics collapse didn't come with fireworks. It came with silence. For weeks, the SEC's presence grew heavier. Agents came and went through the lobby, carrying boxes of files and laptops. Employees whispered nervously in the hallways, watching as the empire they had built crumbled under scrutiny. Investors pulled out. Contracts were cancelled. By midsummer, our once bustling offices felt like a ghost town. Richard Kane grew desperate. His once immaculate suits looked wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He snapped at assistants, berated executives, and stormed out of board meetings. But most telling of all, he stopped smiling. The smug grin that had once been his signature vanished. One evening, as I prepared to leave the office, I found him waiting by my car in the parking garage. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot, and his voice was raw. "You think you've won, Ross?" he hissed. "You think the SEC scares me? I've outlasted worse. I built this company with my bare hands, and I won't let some middle manager with a grudge tear it down." I met his glare calmly. You didn't build this company, Richard. You stole from it. From all of us. He stepped closer, his fists clenched. Careful. Men like me don't go quietly. You've made yourself a target. For the first time, I saw not a CEO, but a desperate man cornered by his own sins. I didn't flinch. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you gave my bonus to your son. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He turned sharply and disappeared into the shadows of the garage. The next week, the board forced Richard to resign. His retirement was announced in a carefully worded press release, but everyone knew the truth. He was finished. The empire he had tried to pass to his son was gone, dismantled by regulators and betrayed by his own arrogance. Tyler, stripped of his privileges, was worse off. His office was emptied. His Maserati repossessed. His credit cards declined at restaurants where he once bragged about owning the room. Former friends abandoned him. He spiraled quickly, caught drunk on camera, ranting about haters and jealous losers. But Richard wasn't done with me yet. 2 weeks after his resignation, I received an unmarked envelope at my apartment. Inside were photos. Me leaving Lydia's office, me meeting with Marcus at a diner, me carrying a box of files. And attached was a note written in Richard's unmistakable hand. I may be out, but I'll take you down with me. Emily found me staring at the photos late that night. What is this? She asked, her voice tight with fear. Richard's last card, I said quietly. He wants to scare me. Ethan, what if he tries to drag you into the investigation? What if he says you helped him? I squeezed her hand. Then I'll show them everything. The truth is my shield. But inside, I wasn't as calm as I sounded. Richard was right about one thing. Cornered men are dangerous. A week later, I was summoned for my official SEC deposition. I sat in a sterile room under buzzing fluorescent lights, facing 2 stern investigators. They slid a stack of documents across the table. Mr. Ross, were you aware of Stratford's financial misconduct before you submitted these materials? I took a breath. Yes, I was aware. I documented it. And I turned it in because it was wrong. Richard Kane thought he was untouchable. But he wasn't. For 6 hours, they grilled me. Dates, details, signatures, emails. I answered every question truthfully. My evidence ironclad. When it was over, the lead investigator leaned forward and said, Mr. Ross, you've done this country a service. We'll be in touch. Walking out of that room, I felt lighter. For months, I had carried the weight of silence, of revenge disguised as patience. Now, justice was no longer in my hands. It was in the systems. But justice has a funny way of unfolding. And Richard Kane's final downfall was still to come. The trial of Richard Kane became a spectacle. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Headlines screamed about corporate greed, executive fraud, and the fall of a once proud CEO. I attended quietly, sitting in the back rows, watching the man who had once stolen my future now fight for his own. Richard sat hunched at the defense table, his lawyers whispering furiously in his ear. Tyler wasn't there. He had fled to California, drowning in his own shame. The prosecution laid out the evidence. Falsified invoices, shell companies, fraudulent expense reports. Piece by piece, the empire Richard built unraveled in front of the jury. Witnesses testified. Former employees, compliance officers, even Marcus. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, swore my oath, and sat down. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The prosecutor handed me a binder. Mr. Ross, can you explain what this document is? I opened it, my fingers steady. This is a report I compiled over several years. It details fraudulent payments authorized by Richard Kane, disguised as consulting fees, funneled through offshore accounts. And when did you present this document? I looked directly at Richard. The day he told me my $450,000 bonus had been given to his son. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I quietly slid this document across his desk. A ripple went through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Richard's face turned crimson. The defense tried to discredit me, painting me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. But every time they asked for proof, the paper trail spoke louder than their words. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty on all counts. Richard Kane was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The empire he tried to pass to his son was dismantled, its assets sold, its name disgraced. As I walked out of the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Ross, did you plan this from the beginning? Was this revenge?" I paused on the steps, the sun warming my face. "No," I said firmly. "This was justice. Revenge ends when you win. Justice begins when the truth does." Emily met me outside, her hand sliding into mine. "It's over," she whispered. But in a way, it wasn't just over. It was the beginning. Stratford's board, desperate to salvage the company, offered me a senior position to help rebuild. I accepted, not for power, not for money, but to prove that honesty could still stand in corporate America. That night, sitting in my office, I looked at the empty desk where Richard once sat. I thought about the journey, from the day he stole my bonus to the day I watched him led away in handcuffs. All it had taken was one document. A document I had slid across his desk, quietly, while he thought he had won. The lesson was simple. Arrogance destroys empires. And silence, when paired with truth, can be louder than any scream.